Be me 23, waitress. Not my career. Just a job to pay the bills while I figure things out. I'd say I'm reasonably attractive. I take care of myself. I have a good group of friends. Life is pretty normal. The restaurant I work at is one of those mid-tier chain places. Always busy, always some drama. The staff is a mix of people like me, career servers, and a few quiet types who just clock in and clock out. One of these guys was Henry. Henry was probably my age, maybe a year or two older. He was one of the bussers, always quiet, always on time, a bit overweight, wore glasses, and had this perpetually shy look on his face, like he was apologizing for taking up space. He was a genuinely nice person, though, the kind of nice you don't really notice until you think about it. He'd always be the first to help someone if they dropped a tray of glasses, never complained about getting a bad section, just did his work. To be honest, I barely registered him as a person. He was just part of the background, like the kitchen doors or the soda fountain. My friends and I, the other waitresses, we were in our own little world. We'd gossip about customers, complain about the managers, talk about our dating lives. Henry was never part of that. He was just there. I never treated him badly, but I definitely looked down on him. It was an unconscious thing. He was at the bottom of the social ladder, and I was somewhere comfortably in the middle, maybe a little higher. That's just how my brain sorted people. The whole thing started a few months back, maybe late spring. It was a slow Tuesday night. A few of us were crammed in the back staff room during a lull. I was on my phone, scrolling, half listening to my friends Jessica and Chloe talk about some guy from the night before. Henry was at the little table with one of the dishwashers, eating some leftover breadsticks. They were talking quietly, but the room is small, so you can't help but overhear. The dishwasher asked him something about dating. Henry let out this heavy sigh, the kind of sound that's more tired than sad. He started talking about some girl he'd been messaging on a dating app for a week. He said she seemed really great. They liked the same shows, same music. He was genuinely excited. He mentioned they were finally supposed to meet up this weekend. But then, yesterday, she sent him this long message. Her laptop had supposedly died right before a huge deadline for a freelance project she was working on. She told him she was in a panic because if she didn't get it fixed, she'd lose the client and couldn't make rent. She asked him if he could possibly lend her $100 just until she got paid on Friday. She swore she'd pay him back the moment they met. I physically rolled my eyes. I couldn't help it. Henry was telling the dishwasher that he felt bad for her, but something felt off. He said a similar thing had happened a few months ago with a different girl who needed money for a vet emergency. He sent that girl the money, and she vanished, blocked his number, unmatched him. He was saying he thought this new girl was different, but he was scared. That's when I cut in. I didn't mean to be as harsh as I was, but the words just came out. I said something like, "You don't actually believe that, do you?" The room went quiet. Henry looked up at me, startled. His face got all red. I didn't stop. I told him it was the most obvious, pathetic excuse I'd ever heard. I asked him if he really thought girls online were that desperate to talk to him that they'd invent these elaborate stories. It was mean, I know that now, but at the time, it felt like I was stating an obvious truth. He tried to defend himself, stammering a little. He said it happens more than you think, that a lot of profiles aren't real and they prey on guys who are lonely. I just laughed. Not a nice laugh. It was condescending. I told him he was being ridiculous, that he was probably just coming on too strong, making these women uncomfortable, and they were making up excuses to get away from him without hurting his feelings. I said, "No offense, Henry, but you're not the type of guy that sophisticated scammers are trying to honey trap. You're just bad at reading signals." The cruelty of that sentence didn't even register with me. He just stared at his hands. The dishwasher suddenly got very interested in a crack in the wall. My friends were snickering behind me. I felt powerful, like I'd just won an argument and put someone in their place. I told him he should stop blaming women for his problems and maybe work on his conversation skills. Then I stood up, said our break was over, and walked out, my friends following me. Henry didn't say another word. He just sat there. Later that night, closing up, my friends and I were talking about it. Jessica said he was giving off major nice guy vibes. Chloe agreed, saying that guys like that always invent conspiracies about women because they can't handle rejection. They told me I was totally right to call him out. It was an echo chamber. Everything they said just reinforced my opinion. I felt completely justified. I saw myself as this champion of common sense, and Henry was this delusional guy living in a fantasy world of internet villains. I painted a whole picture of him in my head. A guy who sits in his mom's basement, complaining on forums about how all women are terrible, when in reality, he's just awkward and has no social skills. That was my neat little box for him, and it made me feel secure in my own worldview. A week or two went by. I barely thought about it. I avoided Henry, and he definitely avoided me. The atmosphere was a little awkward, but life went on. That weekend, I was at a friend's place for a small get-together. Mostly my crowd, but also some of my friend's other male friends who I knew, but not super well. We were all just hanging out, having a few drinks. The topic of bad dates came up, as it always does. I thought it would be a funny story, so I brought up the incident with Henry. I told it in a way that made me sound smart and witty, and made Henry sound like a clueless loser. I got to the part about the broken laptop and his theory about scammers. I was expecting all the guys to laugh and agree with me, but they didn't. There was this awkward silence for a second. Then one of the guys, Mark, a pretty normal, successful dude who works in IT, just looked at me seriously. He said, "Your coworker isn't wrong, you know." I was taken aback. I asked him what he meant. Mark explained that it's a huge industry, scams targeting lonely men. He said there are entire call center type operations in other countries that do this. They use stolen photos, create dozens of fake profiles, and have scripts they follow. He talked about how they build a connection for a week or two, create a sense of trust and hope, and then they invent a crisis. A medical bill, a family emergency, a broken down car. He said the amounts are always small enough to not seem like a huge deal, like $50, $100, $200. Small enough that a guy might think, well, it's worth the risk if she's real. Another guy there, Dave, chimed in. He said his cousin got burned for almost $1,000 over several months by a woman who claimed she was saving up to buy a plane ticket to come see him. He sent money for the ticket, for a visa application, for a new suitcase. Of course, she never showed up. I just sat there, listening. I tried to argue back a little. I said things like, "But you'd have to be pretty dumb to fall for that," and "Couldn't you just tell they were fake?" Mark just shook his head. He wasn't aggressive about it. He was just explaining. He told me that these scammers are professionals. They know exactly what to say. They prey on loneliness. They find men who don't get a lot of attention, and they flood them with affection and validation. They make them feel seen and desired. He said for a guy who hasn't had a date in years, having a beautiful woman give him attention 24/7 is a powerful drug. It makes you ignore red flags. The conversation moved on after that, but it stuck with me. These weren't guys like Henry. These were normal, well-adjusted men that I respected. And they were calmly, factually, telling me that the world I thought I understood didn't work the way I imagined. The seed of doubt was planted. For the first time, I considered the possibility that I'd been completely, arrogantly wrong. But my pride wouldn't let me accept it. I thought, no, they're just talking about extreme cases. Henry is just making excuses. My initial judgment has to be right. I became obsessed with proving it. I needed to know for sure. That's when I came up with the idea for the experiment. It felt a little crazy, but I was driven by this stubborn need to be vindicated. I was going to create a fake profile. I was going to become a guy like Henry online and see what the world looked like from his perspective. I figured I'd spend a week on the app, get a few normal conversations, maybe a few weirdos. And then I could go back to my friends and say, see, it's not that bad. That guy is just a loser. A few days later, on my day off, I put the plan into motion. I spent a couple of hours online looking for the right photos. It had to be perfect. Not a male model. That would attract a different kind of attention. Not someone ugly, because I wanted to get matches. I needed someone who looked like a real, average, slightly lonely guy. I finally found a set of photos on some obscure public forum. A guy in his late 20s, a bit of a dad bod, thinning hair but a kind, gentle smile. He had a picture of him with a golden retriever. Perfect. He looked like someone who would be genuinely looking for love. He looked like a target. I created a new email address. I downloaded the same dating app Henry had mentioned. I started building the profile. I called him Leo. For the bio, I tried to channel everything I imagined Henry would write. I kept it simple, sincere, and a little bit vulnerable. Just a regular guy who works a lot. Enjoy video games, hiking with my dog, and quiet nights in. Tired of the bar scene and hoping to find a real connection with someone kind. Not great at these things, but giving it a shot. I cringed as I wrote it, but it felt authentic. I selected the best photos of my fake man, uploaded them, and set the preferences. My heart was pounding a little. It felt like I was some kind of undercover agent about to go on a secret mission. I sat back, looked at the completed profile, and took a deep breath. I swiped right on a few dozen profiles to get the ball rolling. Then I put my phone down, telling myself I'd check it in the morning. It didn't even take 5 minutes. My phone buzzed. "You have a new match." Then it buzzed again. And again. Before I went to bed that night, Leo had over 20 matches. I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. I opened the app the next morning while my coffee was brewing. The notification number was ridiculous. Over 50 matches, dozens of messages waiting. For a second, a weird sense of pride washed over me. My fake profile was a success. I felt like I had cracked some code. Then I started reading the messages. It was a flood of "hey," "hi," "cute dog," and other generic openers. I decided to engage with a few who seemed the most normal. The first one I replied to was a blonde girl I'll call Amber. Her profile said she was a nursing student. The conversation was incredibly fast. She used a lot of heart emojis. She told Leo he had kind eyes. She asked what he did for work. I made something up about data entry. Boring, stable. We exchanged maybe 10 messages in total. It couldn't have been more than 15 minutes. Then it came. "OMG, you are not going to believe this. My car just made a horrible noise and won't start. I'm going to be late for my clinicals. The tow truck is going to be like $75, and I don't get paid till Friday. So embarrassing to ask. But could you possibly help me out? I'll pay you back double when I see you this weekend, I promise." I just stared at the message. It was almost word for word the kind of thing Henry had described. The fake urgency, the specific small amount of money, the promise of a future meeting that would never happen. It was so blatant, so lazy. My first reaction was laughter. It was just so absurd. I felt like yelling, "You were right, Henry," at my empty apartment. I screenshotted it, feeling like I already had all the proof I needed. This was my smoking gun. I unmatched her without a reply. One down. I moved on to the next girl, Crystal. Her photos were a little too professional, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Crystal was a master of compliments. Everything Leo said was so sweet or so interesting. She laid it on thick, telling him he seemed so different from other guys online, more genuine. The irony was physically painful. We talked for about an hour. The conversation never got deep. It was all surface-level flirting. When I suggested maybe we could grab a coffee sometime, her tone shifted. She said she was a little shy about meeting people from apps right away. She'd had bad experiences, but she said she had a private streaming page where she felt more comfortable getting to know people. She sent me a link. We can have a real one-on-one video chat there where I know it's safe. I clicked the link. It took me to a site that looked like it was designed in 2005. To enter her private room, I needed to buy credits. The smallest package was $19.99. Of course, I felt a wave of disgust. This was even more cynical than the first one. It was a business model built on lonely guys hoping for a real conversation. I closed the browser and blocked her, 2 for 2. My initial amusement was starting to fade. This wasn't funny anymore. It was predatory. For the next few days, I treated it like a morbid science project. I'd spend an hour or two every night after work responding to messages as Leo. The pattern was relentless. I'd say about 1 in every 3 or 4 conversations ended with a request for money or a link to a paid site. A girl whose birthday was tomorrow, and she just wanted enough to buy herself a small cake. A girl who needed to pay a fee to access her modeling portfolio for a big job interview. A girl who accidentally overdrafted her account buying groceries and just needed $40 to avoid bank fees. It was an endless parade of fabricated micro-crises. They all used the same language. They all praised Leo for being such a good listener, so understanding. They were all grooming him for the eventual ask. The most disturbing one was a girl named Sarah. We talked for 3 whole days. She was different. She seemed patient. She asked about Leo's life, his dog, his boring job. She shared stories about her own life. She told me about her little sister, who she was basically raising on her own. She sent me a picture of a little girl, probably scraped from some random family blog. She was building a narrative. She was creating a genuine, emotional connection. I found myself almost forgetting I was Leo. I was getting invested in her fake story. On the 3rd day, she told me her sister was sick. She had a bad asthma attack and had to go to the emergency room. She said she didn't have insurance, and the bill for the breathing treatment and medication was a few $100s. She didn't ask for money directly, not at first. She just talked about how scared she was, how she didn't know what she was going to do, how she felt like a failure for not being able to provide for her sister. It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. She was making Leo feel like he was the only one she could turn to, the hero who could swoop in and solve her problems. Then, finally, she sent the message. "I hate myself for even asking this. You've been so kind to me. But is there any way you could help with the pharmacy bill? Even just a little bit would be a miracle right now." That one hit me hard. It wasn't a clumsy, quick scam like the others. This was cruel. It was weaponized empathy. I thought about Henry. I imagined him getting these messages, his big, kind heart wanting to help this poor girl and her sick sister. I imagined him sending the money without a second thought because he's a good person. And I imagined Sarah getting the notification and just moving on to her next target. I felt sick to my stomach. I blocked her, my hands shaking a little. I didn't touch the app for the rest of the week. I couldn't. The experiment was over. My hypothesis was not just wrong, It was embarrassingly, catastrophically wrong. The world I had so confidently explained to Henry was a complete fantasy. The reality was a digital minefield, and he was walking through it every day, just hoping to find one person who was real. The shame hit me like a physical blow. I remembered my words to him in the break room. You're just bad at reading signals. Nobody is trying to scam you. Stop blaming women for your problems. Every syllable echoed in my head, dripping with my own arrogance and ignorance. I hadn't just been wrong. I had been cruel. I had taken his genuine hurt and vulnerability and used it to make myself feel superior in front of my friends. I had kicked a man who was already down. For what? For a cheap laugh and a feeling of being right. The next day at work was torture. I saw Henry by the bus station, clearing trays. He had his head down, working methodically, lost in his own world. He looked so harmless, so tired. My chest tightened. I felt an overwhelming urge to go over there, to tell him everything, to say, Henry, I am so sorry. You were right. I was a complete idiot, and what I said to you was horrible. I took a step towards him, but then I saw Jessica and Chloe at the server station, watching me. I saw the other staff moving around. My entire body froze. What would I even say? How do you admit to something like that? Hey everyone, you know that guy I humiliated last week? Well, I created a fake online identity to prove him wrong, but it turns out he was 100% right, and I'm actually a terrible person. They would think I was insane. I would be the office joke for months. My pride, my social standing, all of it just formed a wall in front of me. I couldn't do it. The shame was too great. The embarrassment was paralyzing. So I turned around and walked back to the kitchen, my heart feeling like a lead weight. Henry glanced up for a second as I passed. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. There was no anger in his expression, just nothing. It was like he didn't even see me anymore. That was somehow worse than if he'd been angry. I had made myself irrelevant to him. It's been a couple of weeks since then. I've been trying to be nicer to Henry, in small ways. I'll say thank you when he clears my table. I'll make sure to save him a piece of staff meal if he's on a late break. Pathetic, I know. It's nothing. It's the coward's apology. He's polite back, but distant. The damage is done. I can't undo that public humiliation. I can't bring myself to confess to him. I can't bring myself to confess to my friends, who still make jokes about him sometimes. Every time they do, a piece of me just shrivels up. I just stay quiet. So that's why I'm writing all this out here. I can't say it to anyone's face, but the guilt is eating me alive. I needed to put it somewhere. To admit what I did, even if it's to a bunch of anonymous strangers on the internet. Henry was right about everything. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's real. And it's awful. I was so wrapped up in my own simplistic view of the world that I couldn't see the reality that was right in front of me. To any of you guys out there dealing with this stuff, I'm sorry. I'm sorry on behalf of every person like me who dismissed you, who laughed at you, who told you it was your own fault. We were wrong. You were right. And Henry, if by some 1 in a billion chance you ever read this, I'm sorry. I truly am.